Thank you very much. I also wrote The Stupids, which ended Tom Arnold's film career. So I'm not perfect. Thank you for coming. This is so flattering. I'm trying to assess who we have here. I see some hotshot TV writers for sure, a lot of students, which is great. I assume we have a mix of aspiring television writers. I know we have some aspiring producers as well. I want to talk about TV show running because, in my experience, TV show running is not always done perfectly. That may be a euphemism. A lot of people would say that most shows are run poorly. And I think that there's a case to be made for that. The effects of a TV show being run poorly are severe on the showrunner and all the people who work for him or her. And so it's vitally important, I think, for showrunners to figure out how to do the job well. And yet there really is no instruction program for us. You come up, generally as a TV writer, you try to figure out how it's done, and then you apply some kind of system, hopefully, to the job. What I have found through experience is that there is a system which for me works. It's literally a formula that I will share with you, and then you can go off and run shows in a healthy, efficient way. So that's step one. I just want to share with you a formula. And then what I'd like to do is shine a light on the writer's room itself. The writer's room is the core of any TV show. It's the nucleus of the show. And there are distinct techniques you can use to make that writer's room run more productively, more efficiently, and create brilliant scripts more quickly, which allows you to go home earlier. And that's kind of the weird end game of the TV writer's life. Our job is to create brilliant scripts on time, which is a seemingly daunting process when you look at it. When you think how infrequently a human being ever writes a half-hour play that is good, to imagine trying to do it at your highest level of quality 22 times a year can be daunting, but it's totally doable within the time frame given if you have a good system. All right. Let's. So I'll show you my system. I'll shine a light on the writer's room, and show you some techniques you can use there. And then, if you still have any appetite for knowledge left in you, I will share with you secrets of Apatow. So Judd Apatow is a guy I've been working with on and off for 20 years. He's one of my heroes in the business because of his talent and his artistic orientation. And so I have been collecting sort of secrets of the way this guy does what he does. I will share those with you as well. All right, and then if there's time, I'll take a question and answer. But let's see how quickly I can share all of this info with you. All right, so let's start with the context. The television industry is, I think, uniquely stressful to human beings. And it's a truism. We all know this. People talk about TV as a grind, and it seems to be harder on people as they rise higher in the ranks, as if the responsibility of it begins to crush them more and more. The reasons for this, if you look at it, are self-evident. The TV industry is one in which you are risking huge amounts of money on a product. And anytime you risk money, there's going to be fear and tension built into the system. In addition, the product that you're making is not objective. If we were making race cars, we would say, well, this one goes faster, it's better. What we're making is subjective, so it's impossible to firmly evaluate whether what you've got is good or bad. It evolves quickly so that the quality product that you have at the end, a good script, for example, becomes quality really only at the last second. And so up until that point, it's in some ways below your standard, which is very stressful. The most stressful thing, though, about the television industry is it contains intrinsic to it the great stressor on human beings that there is, which is time pressure. Television is a constant race against the clock, and nothing causes people to sweat and have anxiety like time pressure. So that's the big thing you're dealing with. It is everybody, either TV writers in this room, we have watched our showrunners gain 70 pounds. We have watched showrunners age 10 years in 2 seasons. We've watched marriages break up. There are people in this room who have known multiple suicides in the TV industry. And the thing about TV writers is when we hear a guy killed himself, we don't even act surprised. We're like, oh, that makes sense. Sure. Well, the TV industry, right? So you can see it's a real thing that we have to deal with. It's a human life, quality of life issue. But I think it is solvable. The theory that I want to propose is that not only is all of that dysfunction unnecessary, it's the opposite of how it can and should be. That when you look at what the process of making a TV show is, it's actually breakdownable into distinct units, all of which are tasks that are extremely enjoyable to do in and of themselves. Because of this, you will occasionally be on a show and go, my God, this is the best job in the world. We're just writing scenes, we're talking stories, we're making stuff up. Actors are saying it and they're filming it and putting it on TV. And so when you realize that the job can be the greatest job in the world and that it's frequently the opposite, you are moved to speak. And that's why I'm talking to you here, is to try to return a sort of mental health to the industry. And it starts with organization. Okay, so let's talk about the Forrester system of organization and how you can use this to run your TV shows. All right, basically, if you are a showrunner, and at the end of your long and profitable career, they make a statue of you, you should be holding a calendar. That is your principal tool as a showrunner. You are the organizer of the writer's time. If you look at a TV show, it's made of a bunch of different parts. There are different departments. There's camera department, there's wardrobe, there's hair, there's script department. Script department, as it turns out, is the most important of the departments. Everything else can run without you. People will come to you if you're the top person and ask for your decisions. But decision making, this or that, this actor or that actor, this dress or that dress, all of that can be done by you today. You have that skill now. You do not need to be trained in that. It's just your opinion. But script department, the creating of the scripts, is something that requires more than opinion. It requires a system. The key to the system of TV writing starts with pre-production. So you're standing there with your calendar. What's on your calendar? All right, well, let's look at what the TV schedule is. You are in production when you're shooting the shows. Sometime before that, you start your writer's room, getting together, working on scripts, trying to get as many scripts written as you can. That's called pre-production. You might get 12 weeks for pre-production. You might get 10 weeks for pre-production. You might get 8 weeks for pre-production. Those are standard times depending on the budget of the show. Now, if I'm a producer of a show and it's my money and you're the showrunner, I'm going to say to you, I'd like you to have 8 weeks of pre-production because then I don't have to pay you for 2 more weeks. So essentially a negotiation has kind of happened throughout the industry where the bare minimum amount of time that you can have to do your job is what I'm going to give you because I don't want to pay for more than that. That's why you have always time pressure, because you always are having the exact minimum amount of time to do your job if the corporation is doing its job and giving you the least amount of time that they can. Okay, so let's go on our minimum one here, 8 weeks. You're not going to get less than 8 weeks in a network show. You're probably going to get 10 or more, but it can be done with 8 weeks. Let's look at how that would break down. In your first few weeks, you are in a process of generation. So if we're a writing staff, we come together, we're starting in week 1, we're starting in day 1, we're going to sit together as a group, and we're going to talk in the most abstract terms about what we're doing. We might talk about what makes for a great TV show. We might talk about what our favorite shows are. We might even watch a show. We watch the pilot. We talk about the pilot. We talk about the characters. This goes on for a day, 2 days, 3 days, and we're going from the more abstract to the more concrete. So after a day or so, probably you're writing ideas on cards, ideas for stories, ideas for scenes are showing up on 3x5 cards, just so that you're going from abstract to concrete. At a certain point in this portion of your beginning pre-production. You will greenlight the writers to go off in their rooms and brainstorm stories. This is a typical process. The writers in this room know this process well. The one thing I'll add, even for some of our veterans here, is that what I'm noticing is a new element has cropped up in pre-production in that time when we're in our first couple weeks generating stories. The new element is the arcing out of the show. So when I first entered TV, the idea was that all the episodes could be sort of scrambled. They might be scrambled. A show goes into syndication. We don't know what episode of Cheers is playing this week, and so the episodes need to be very independent. Over time, with shows like Lost and 24, with Netflix shows, there's been a taste in the audience for serialization, a major shift in the way the audience wants to consume things. And you see it now affecting network shows. In our last season at The Office, season 9, we tried to arc out the entire show, 22 episodes with 18 characters. What this means is that in the new model of pre-production, while you're talking from the abstract to the concrete and then talking about stories, you are also going to try to arc out your season in large chunks. So what I'm gesturing to here is an imaginary wipe-off board that as you become a showrunner now, you're going to need in your room. It's just as big as it can be. The whole frickin' wall is what I use. I mean, giant wipe-off board space. Divided into lines, episode 1, 2, 3, 4, as many as you can do. I'm doing 10 episodes on Netflix, so we just did 10. And we try to figure, what are the major moves here? You know, what can we write in here with our little wipe-off pen about how the character relationships are progressing? Where are we headed? So this becomes another element of your pre-production. Okay, so in your first few weeks, you're talking abstractly, you're trying to get more concrete. At a certain point, you send writers off in their rooms to pitch, to think of ideas. You have them come back in and pitch. You're generating story ideas, okay? And in the first few weeks, that's really all you're doing. At a certain point, you're going to have to greenlight writers to write scripts. And this is when you kind of go into phase 2 of the formula. So let's ask ourselves, we have 8 weeks of pre-production. How many weeks in do we go before we start greenlighting people to write scripts? Well, the answer lies in how long does it take to write a script? How long does it take to write a script that is brilliant, right? Because that's what we want. Well, through trial and error, I have come to the conclusion that the bare minimum time that you want to set aside to have a script written brilliantly is 3 weeks. 3 weeks break down in the following way. And this is the core of the Forrester formula. Thank you for coming here. As a reward, I'm giving you this for free. All right, here it is, the 3-week formula. Week 1, tell the story. So you'll find as writers, the greatest technique that you can use when you're going to write a half-hour episode or an hour episode, whatever you're going to write, start by trying to tell the story. So if I'm writing an episode of Love, I'm writing episode 9, I would say to this young writer here, Bennett Walsh, Bennett, okay, here's what I'm thinking. You know, I think the story opens and we've got the character Mickey, the woman, she's in her room and she's cyber stalking this guy that she's obsessed with. You know, she's looking at YouTube videos. Okay? So here I'm making eye contact with this guy, I'm pitching to him, I'm trying to tell the story orally. And I'll tell it from beginning to end. The process of that eliminates so many of the hang-ups of writing. Because you'll just notice as you're doing it, people are interested here, they're following. Oh, they got the twist. Oh, you confused them here, there's something wrong here. They didn't like this part. You'll just get it in real-time feedback. So week 1 is all tell the story. Within that, again, try to go from abstract to concrete. So if I have a writer coming in, if I've greenlit a writer to write an episode, I would say, okay, go in another room, talk about your story with another writer, and then come in at 4 o'clock and pitch me and the room the story. Okay, so I'm giving them a concrete event to motivate them. The performance of pitching will energize them. They will tell their thing. And keep in mind, we expect major re-break of this story every time they come in. They come in at 4 and pitch it. The feedback is, you guys, you're in the wrong direction. That's typical. That's fine. That's what we want to happen in week 1. We're really trying to brutalize this story in week 1 so that we don't have to brutalize it later. in our perfect world, this is the end of our major rebreaking of the stories in week 1. Abstract to concrete, pitching it. Okay, guys, good pitch. You got the feedback. Go back in the room tomorrow. Now, one on cards. Okay, put it on cards. We still use 3x5 cards in cork in this digital age. You get a cork board and you put your cards, and each card represents a scene or some beat. And it gives you a nice graphic look at what the story is. Writers come back in with the cards. They pitch some cards. All right, they keep going back and forth like this all week. Thursday, in my formula, Thursday night, you do an outline. Write that outline. Interior bank, write what happens. Exterior park, write what happens, okay? You're done with that. Friday, whoever is the top human being in the show is going to read that and give notes on it. What I'm trying to do is force the top person in the show, it might be a couple, it might be co-creators of the show up here, whoever is empowered to throw out your story should be forced to look at it before that writer goes off to write it. So that's a big event. We're trying to eliminate story rebreak by forcing the big players to confront the story and give their opinion. All right, at the end of Friday, that's the end of week 1, writer goes off to write. Week 1, tell the story. Week 2, write a draft. Okay, now how does write a draft break down? Well, we've sent our writer off with an outline. The stages of write a draft that I think really work are, step 1, the vomit pass. The vomit pass is a phrase that comes from Judd Apatow, coined that as far as I know. It's a very important technique for all you writers to embrace, which is you have your outline, and your goal is to write that draft, just starting at the top and finishing. We're not going to go back. We're not going to rewrite any lines. We're not going to second guess ourselves, right? You just look at what your scene is supposed to be in the outline, write that scene, write the action, write the dialogue, move on. You're trying to completely turn off the critical mind that is evaluating whether what you've written is good or bad. It does not matter whether it's good or bad. A lot of it will probably be quite good and better than you expect. Some of it might be problematic. That will teach you something in the process of writing this draft. The main thing is you do not get hung up. Get from fade in to fade out as quickly as you can. I think for most professional writers, the vomit pass is, it's a 2-day process. Jonathan Green could do it in a day. Gabe Miller could do it in a day. Dan Hernandez, Benji, these guys can do it in a day, probably. But you know, if they took 2 days, I wouldn't be bothered. That's your vomit pass. Don't take more than 2 days. Boom, you got it done. Okay, now what do? You generated it. The generative mind creates. Now the critical mind looks at it with a sharpened pen and an eye to what's good, what's wrong here. I'd just like to take a aside here and say that in my experience, the artistic creative process, the writing process really does break down well into generative and critical. Generative is when you're flowing, you've got ideas, how about this, oh this is great. Critical is when you say, which of these ideas is best? Very important not to try to do both of these at the same time. That really is what writer's block is, where you're like, I've got an idea, but it probably wouldn't work. You know, we could do this, but it's been done before. You must turn off that critical part while you're creating. And for a lot of you, especially the young, intelligent people in this audience, you will find this is a major struggle because so much of your training as a student and an academic is critical. Your critical mind is actually overdeveloped. And your generative is not nurtured in school to anywhere close to the degree. So you'll find you have this extremely powerful critical faculty and a less confident and less developed generative one. So turn off the critical and just flow. That's how you do your vomit pass. Then go get critical. Take your pencil, make all your notes, then do another pass. Vomit plus 2 is your week. Vomit pass plus 2 passes. That's really all you need. Easily done in a week. Now you have a draft. Okay, now we go into week 3. Week 3, each day is different, but watch how, even in this 3-week process, you can and should get to brilliance if you do it right. Okay, writer has finished a draft in week 2. Writer brings draft to the writer's room. Print it out, all the writers read it. Read in their little rooms with their pencils, right? Now you're going to get some major feedback from 5, 6, 8 writers, okay? It's going to be a lot. You're going to get a lot of smart people saying a lot of smart things. What we do in this feedback process, what I do is sit at the keyboard I have another screen behind me. So I'm looking at my computer screen, but I have a giant screen behind me. Sometimes a giant screen facing them, whatever it is, so that the other writers can see the script. And then as the notes come in, we start with a kind of general notes on the script, and then we start getting more specific, abstract to concrete. And then we get to the most concrete, which is writing in notes in the script, appearing on the wall behind me, saying, okay, this line didn't work, new line here. This scene, let's try adding Martha to this scene. Cut this scene, add a beat where we're at the gas station here. So we're writing notes in the script of what we're going to do in the rewrite. This I call the roadmap. This is a term which is becoming more common now, the roadmap for your rewrite. Again, this comes just from writing experience. Like I found when writing alone, when writing screenplays alone, which I always found were very difficult, my writing day would go well if I had a plan. Without a plan, you're sort of trying to make a plan and write at the same time. So I very much suggest splitting those two processes up. Okay, so day one, writer's script comes in, we make a roadmap, we might even start our rewrite process on that Monday. Tuesday, we really do a rewrite, and we do a rewrite with the room. We do a room pass of the script. So the room pass, I really want to dwell on this for one moment, because the room, the writer's room, is understood to be a core part of the process of any network television show. What I'm starting to experience on shows that are not network, a Netflix show for example, some of the cable shows, they seem to prioritize the room less. It's possibly because they're making less episodes and don't have the same pressure. But when you do have the pressure and you do need the brilliance, the room is it. What is so great about the room? All right, let me put it this way. What if I told you that I had a writer, and this writer was very talented. I mean, this is a good comedy writer, good enough to work on a professional television show. And then I said, I have another writer who is exactly twice as good as that person. No, I got another one who's 4 times as good. Literally, it's as if you had that good writer and added 3 more brains to that person. And now that person is able to generate 4 times as many good lines, 4 times as many smart ideas, has 4 times as many insights into what's going right and wrong. That is the room. That is literally what it is. Greg Daniels used to describe it as like having electrodes coming out of your head into a bunch of other brains and massively increasing your sort of computer software. I think it's an apt metaphor. So what you'll find is if you run a room properly, soliciting feedback in real time and doing the rewrite, you essentially are having an inhumanly brilliant entity doing a pass on your script. And it does have that effect. That is how, ultimately, we are able to create brilliant scripts in the amount of time that no ordinary human being could do it. So the room, a pass with the room. Monday, notes and roadmap. Tuesday, room pass. Wednesday, table read. So the table read, a part of any show. The table read does a couple things for you. It gives you a hard deadline where all of your bullshit will be detected. Because now everybody's opinion that this worked and this wouldn't and this is good and this isn't is going to be tested for real, live, in front of everybody. It's a day in which you will notice high energy to the point of nervousness for a lot of people. But if you can stay short of nervousness, it's just energizing. You've got actors who are energizing the process. You have a public reading, and now you have a whole new level of aggressive feedback on your script. Once again, you take that feedback and you go and do a roadmap. Aside here, I think in the history of TV, as I have experienced it in the way it's run today, way too much balkanization of the actors in the notes process. Most of the time, the actors are not invited into the notes process at all. I've been experimenting lately with letting them in, saying, hey, we're going to do notes after the table read. Why don't you give your top thoughts? We'll listen, and then we'll continue to talk. It's great. Why wouldn't you do that? Writers, clever, experienced, talented as we are actually frauds in one major department. Most of us writers have limited experience creating characters. Most of us came up writing on shows in which the characters were already created for us, and we simply had to write for those characters, replicating the voices that we already heard. The people who are very good at character are the actors. The actors are sitting there thinking about the character and the depths of it in a way that no writer ever would. We simply can't. We have too many characters. One actor can think about one character. One writer can't think about the backstory of 8. So I think it's a massive efficiency and quality increaser if you allow the actors to teach you what they're thinking after the table read. All right, so table read Wednesday, go back and do another roadmap with the writers. Now, Thursday, what do? The room again. That fucking genius is back. But this time, that genius is working from a script, which at this point should be pretty damn good and has a clear roadmap for how to get better. So in one more day now, Thursday, boom, you do a full pass with the room. What I have found, and this is where you get your black belt in show running, I believe, is that what you can do on Thursday is create a fat draft. Let me explain what this is and why this is so marvelously important to you. All right. The term showrunner suggests one human being sort of running the entire entity. And there's kind of a myth of that. There are some people who are real, true showrunners who do everything. It sounds like in cable, it's much more common where they have less episodes. But in network, it's just not possible for any one human being to supervise everything, the wardrobe, the casting, the set design, the network notes, and run the writer's room. So those two things will be split up very frequently. You will have typically a creator who's sort of the one saying yes, no to everything, and then a showrunner whose main job is organizing the writer's room. When you have this setup, a wonderful thing that you can do for yourself is, on that Thursday where you get the room for the second time, you create a fat draft. The fat draft is your rewrite of the script, but you leave within that script a bunch of what we call alts, which are alternative punchlines. So your script is whatever it is, 30 pages plus 5 pages of extra jokes, extra lines. You might even put an extra scene in there. Now, on Friday, the creator comes and locks the script, simply going through the script and choosing, oh, I like that better than that, this better than that, I want this better than that. It's a very easy rewrite for the showrunner on Friday, and allows, or the creator rather, on Friday, and allows the creator to have a significant final pass, but one that is completely teed up for success. That's the process that we used the last season of The Office when it worked at its best. And it's the system that I really think is the one to go with. It's a 3-week system. But don't be fooled. Just because it's a 3-week system doesn't mean you have to start it 3 weeks before that episode shoots. So the season after The Office, I went on a show on ABC, and I realized that the major thing you're up against when you are the showrunner running the room under the creator is that the creator is going to be indecisive frequently and will push the decision making on what stories we're doing until the last second. Even so, I tried always to make 4 weeks out my flashing red alarm, we must greenlight a story moment. Because with 4 weeks out, I know I can get it done in the 3 weeks and have a little bit of wiggle room as well. I strongly suggest that even if you use a 3-week process, you try to start it a week or 2 weeks before that, 5 weeks out, 4 weeks out. You will find that even though that is rational, you will be struggling against the top creator person, because typically your top creator person will want to push decision making until the last second. That, my friends, is the Forrester system. Enjoy it. Now let's take a look at the writer's room itself. Okay, the writer's room is the core of the show. You know, it's not that the writing is the only thing in a show, and sometimes people begin to feel that. We writers can start to feel like all that matters is the writing of the show. I think that's a mistake, that in fact that's not what the audience is really responding to. The audience is responding just as much to the performers and the acting and the characterization that the actors bring. Even if you say it's mostly about the acting, it's still the case that good scripts are what allow good actors to perform well. It is certainly the case, a truism of the industry, that if the script factory runs well, the show runs well. If your scripts are brilliant and on time, the actors have good stuff to do, the directors can prepare, the crew is rational. So it still does come down to the writer's room. Now, in my experience, there are a lot of techniques that you can use to make your writer's room work better. I think it's interesting and useful first to just kind of look at what a writer's room is, because it's a unique kind of work environment. You're basically, if you are the head writer, the showrunner, the person running that room, you are the captain of a team that must work together for success. That's all well and good. The problem is that most writers actually have very little experience of team. Think about who writers are. Most of us are sort of isolated people who read and scribbled in notebooks and didn't have a lot of friends. We're sort of really antisocial by nature. Frequently not athletes, did not play team sports, hyper-intellectual, a little bit paranoid, amazingly neurotic, crazy worriers, and that's what you're dealing with, and that's what you must manage as your team. Okay, so how do you do this? Oh, and in addition, you know, writers are artists. Artists typically are a little flaky. They have trouble getting started. They're prone to being highly demoralized, and they're actually by nature fairly disorganized and undisciplined. So you have to both motivate and provide structure for writers, is my basic feeling. Okay, so how do you do these things? Well, I think you can start with your writer's room. You know, a lot of writers' rooms I've noticed look more like dorm rooms than like law firms. And that's okay, I guess. We're trying to create a sense that there's a feeling of free play here. But I think actually you want it to look more organized than disorganized. In particular, I think you want to use your walls. The walls of your office are actually one of the great tools that you have. I mentioned the wipe-off board in which you arc out the show. Currently on the show that I'm on, every single wall seems to be covered with some kind of wipe-off board that has information. One is arc of the season. Two is what we're doing this week, next week, and beyond. This was something I started this year, and I found it really helped the writers to just kind of know what is it we're trying to accomplish today? What are we trying to accomplish tomorrow? What are our deadlines? What is our table read? So often in the history of our profession, we writers are sort of in the dark and just flowing along with whatever the head writer wants us to do. When the writers know where they're headed, they're much more efficient and on it. And in fact, I think a little more motivated because they can see the concrete horizons. So I have a what we're doing this week board as well. Another one that I started this year, which I think is super useful, is a wipe-off board that just simply says how to write Gus. That's one of our characters. Okay, how do you write Gus? And then we just wrote down he's a people pleaser, he's oversensitive, he's goofy, he likes to sing, and just kept adding traits about how to write this guy. We did it with all the major characters. It just sits up there on the wall. When I say it to you now, it seems like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you ever do that? The reason is because most of us writers are afraid to admit that we don't quite know how to write the character or afraid to ask, and so you kind of want to preemptively just start that. It saves everybody so much time when they go to write scripts. So I think that is one technique you can use, which is use the walls. Okay, focus and digression. This is a really interesting element for me for writers. Okay, so you have your group of writers, and you have a work day. You know, the work day varies massively in the TV industry. You know, there was I heard in the final years of King of the Hill they were working from 10 until 4 p.m. Right? Just whatever that is. You know, that's an incredibly short work day for us. Much more common is to hear shows that go from 10 until midnight, 10 until 2 a.m., 10 until 4 a.m. What is happening there? To me, this seems very unnecessary, and there are certain things that you can do to eliminate this kind of endless workday. One of them, believe it or not, is to insist on a rigid start time. It's incredible how uncommon this is in the television industry. When I was on The Simpsons, our start time was 10, but then if you showed up at 10, you'd notice that a lot of people showed up at 10:15, and some showed at 10:30, and then the next day you'd be like, well, I'm not going to be the idiot who shows up at 10. I'll show up at 10:15 like some of these smarter people, and then it just keeps drifting, and then pretty soon 11 o'clock is really your start time. And you can see why a day would go much longer if it started much later. So as showrunner, and this may be apply to all of you who are being producers as well, when you get into a leadership position, it's kind of essential that you say, we start at 10, people. If you need to get in at 9:45, get your coffee, go for it. But I'm in here. I'm here ready to go at 10. And set that example. It will save you a shitload of time. You will also have to remind the writers probably 1,000 times before they agree to it. It's one of the weird phenomenons that I find in biz. You just have to keep saying it's 10, guys, it's 10. Another one is digression. Okay, so you're sitting in a room with a bunch of funny, wisecracking TV writers, okay? What is more fun than to go, did you see Mad Men last night? Did you see that show? Oh my God, how about the finale? And then, you know, there's no limit to how long people are going to talk about the TV show they watched last night, right? And these are good storytellers. They're funny people. This is why they're in the business, because they're good at saying funny things. If you have a room of 8 people and one person tells a funny story, every single one of those people in that room is like, oh, so we're telling funny stories, all right. And you lose 8 times 10 minutes. So I find a shitload of what I do on the job is, at 10 a.m., I try to start a conversation about the work that we're doing. Welcome, great, good stuff yesterday. You know what's interesting about episode 107? I was thinking about it, and really, if you think about it, the ending might be different than what we were talking about. You know, Dave over here was talking, and now I'll start calling people out. All artists, writers, musicians, actors, the common denominator of all of these professions is the people in it are needy of attention. Why do you pick up a guitar and go like this? Because you want people to hear you and look at you. Why do you become an actor? Because you want to be seen. You become a writer because you want to be heard. And so principally what you're doing is you're harnessing that need for your own advantage. All right? So you start a conversation, you provoke people to talk about 107. I'm interested in your opinion of 107. You speak it, and I find what is interesting and correct and good about what you said, and I compliment it. All right? You probably did, so you're a professional TV writer. You probably said something very intelligent about episode 107. I say, that is so interesting and smart and correct. Now all the other competitive 8 people in the room are motivated to do the same, right? Because they want their compliment as well. And that is largely how you keep a room running. When it digresses, as it always does, you kind of sit there politely, you know, people will see that you're impatient. Sometimes you have to make a joke to bring it back. Anyway, so speaking of Mad Men, 107 should be as good as Mad Men, and you bring it back to 107. You end up doing that a lot. So starting at 10, limiting digression, I think are very important for your efficiency. I have been accused of having attention surplus disorder because of the amount of refocusing that I do on a daily basis. We had a rule that we formed season 9 of The Office. We made a decision that the most efficient number of people in a room was 5. And I think that's remains very true. Writing staffs can grow quite large. When I was first on The Simpsons, there were 18 writers on that staff. And the head writer would frequently keep them all together in the room. He just wanted all of his geniuses there, and when we're working, he wants to have them all there. The problem is, if you ever try to have a conversation, a dinner party, with 5 people, you'll find it goes brilliantly. If you have 6, maybe a little less so, certainly in a writer's room. When you have a 6th person there, you actually have too many inputs, too many opinions. You're going to have to start choosing one over another too frequently. 6 is less efficient than 5. So 5 is kind of your top number for a room. What do you do if you have more writers on your staff than 5? Well, if, you know, Dan Hernandez, you remember, we would see 5 in a room. There's a 6th person in the room. When I count, there's a 6th. 6th person gets podded off. If there's 7, those 2 get podded off. Put in a pod, you know, go off in it's a sort of a sci-fi metaphor from the animators. Put them in a pod, right? Let them do something else. So if you have 5, you see more, have them do something else. Have them come up with another story. Have them punch up another episode. It's a small but miraculous thing to do, because then at the end of your workday with your 5 people, a couple people walk in who had a whole other workday that they just hand you. So you just got 2 workdays done in one day simply by podding people off. Now there were times on The Office when we had 4 rooms going at once, and we were incredibly proud of ourselves because we were working at 4 times the efficiency. It definitely pays off. That is how you get to go home early, is by efficient moves like that. For my show running friends up here, I would just say a recent lesson that I learned When you pod people off, you're running the room, you got your 5, you got these 2, send them off to a room. Always ask them, when you send them off, for a deadline. Say, can you give me a deadline on what you're doing there? Ask them to make their deadline. If you don't do it, it will take twice as long as if you do ask them for a deadline. It's a very interesting move because when you ask somebody for a deadline, they sort of proudly give themselves a deadline, which is a little ambitious, I've noticed. But if you give them a deadline, they, oh, fucker, you know. So it's a good move. Ask them to make their own deadline when you pod off. Writer's energy is something I'm very interested in. What I have noticed is when you are at full focus, when you are really working without digressing, trying to create, trying to write, most writers are good for about 3 hours, 4 hours tops of pure focus. Some of the great ones can go longer than that, 5 hours of pure focus. But most of them can't. And it's so important to understand this because the long writing hours frequently correlate to writers tiring out, stopping work, digressing because they don't want to think about the work anymore. I think your best move actually is to start a very focused workday at 10 and just keep it burning unbroken for 3 hours, 4 if you can, and then recognize that that's actually the core of your writing day. Writers get tired as time goes on. You know, after lunch you can get another work session out of them, but you should expect that your really good, intense, great, brilliant writing happens in the first part of the day. Stuff that's more pedestrian, like watching dailies, looking at actors' auditions, push that to the later part of the day. You can still do it, but you're not going to be as brilliant, so push it to the end of the day. Those are some key elements of running the writer's room. The last large writer's room technique that I would like to try to share with you is a sort of larger one. It has to do with the attitude that you as the leader bring to the room. So when I was on The Simpsons, season 5, 6, 7, the room was a collection of some of the most brilliant wits that, you know, America could find at that time. It was just a genius sort of collection. And the way the rewriting went was we would all have a script. The head writer would say, go to page 3. We need a new line for Homer here. And then the room would go into total silence as everyone tried to think of a single brilliant line that could go here for Homer. And that silence would persist sometimes for minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. People wouldn't say anything because they were so afraid of pitching a line that wasn't amazing in front of this peer group that was so daunting. My feeling is that is not the way to do it. The truth is, comedy writing is a bit of a mystery, but one thing we know for sure, even the most brilliant comedy writers that we have in here are not brilliant 100% of the time. It's a trial and error process, even for the best of them. A great comedy writer might have 3 funny things every 10 times that she speaks. So what is the key to a trial and error system? What is the key? More trial. If you just simply have more trial, you're going to have more quality at the end. So what you really want to do is create an environment in which people are so comfortable, they're just throwing out lines, completely unselfconsciously. The more unselfconscious you can get the room, the better, is my feeling. How do you do that? Well, there are many techniques for this. You know, one is just kind of the vibe that you set. You know, complimentary vibe. I'm an easy laugh. You say something that you're attempting to be funny, I'm probably going to laugh, right? That doesn't mean necessarily it's going in the script, but it means that this is a safe environment for pitching. When I have a group of people pitching, and I got the big screen up there behind me, what's going to happen if you pitch a line and I don't write it in the script? It's basically negative feedback for you. Watch what happens if you pitch a line and I instantly write it in the script. And then you pitch a line and I write Alt and write another line. So now every line that gets pitched here is going up on the screen. Just Alt, Alt, Alt. We literally write ALT in a parenthetical, line, Alt. Every time I do that, you get positive feedback. Like, yeah, I got something up on the board there, not bad. Instantly, people are generating, and your trial massively increases. So that element of positive feedback alone is a massive productivity increaser. Lately, I have been experimenting with how positive an attitude I can bring to the writer's room. I was influenced by Bryan Cranston, the actor, from Breaking Bad who directed an episode of The Office, and I asked him about his directing technique, and I said, you seem to give only positive feedback. You never give any criticism at all. He said, yes. He said, if I want you to be thinking about your mother in this next take, what I do is I say, great take, that last take, I loved how I could feel you thinking about your mother. So I compliment you for something you haven't even done as a way of promoting you to do it the next time. It doesn't even really fool the actor necessarily, but it's just a very positive way of communicating a message. And that's what he does. I think what you really notice positive energy leadership is on set, where you have the maximum time pressure, you have the maximum tension, actors with cameras in their faces thinking about their careers. In those environments of hypersensitivity and high stakes and extreme time pressure, you discover that pure positive energy leadership is the norm. That's what the good directors do. I've been trying to bring that to the writer's room, and I think largely with success. One thing I do is I feel that you can't lie to people. You can't compliment them willy-nilly and expect them to trust you. They'll start to feel like you're just kind of flattering them unnecessarily. But you can, for sure, within the process, on any given day, on any morning, you can say, I just want to point out what happened yesterday, okay? Benji just crushed it. That dude went in a room, we didn't know where we were going with the story, and he came back with 4 fucking great ideas. We used one of them. Thank you, Benji, for doing that. And also, can I just say, I was so inspired by Allison, who, we had to write these sides. Those sides are so funny. I'm so grateful to work with you guys. Let's go crush it. And that was true. What I said was true. Those writers know it. Okay. Frequent acknowledgement of accomplishment is the great morale booster. I highly recommend it for any profession. Why wouldn't you do this? Largely you wouldn't do it because there's something unusual about it. It takes a certain amount of courage to be the person who does that. I recommend that you have that courage in any profession. Watch how the people you work with light up under those circumstances. I will leave this section with just one anecdote about how far I took it this year. We had, so I'm working on this show, Love. Judd Apatow is producing. Got a bunch of great writers. 2 writers turned in scripts roughly at the same time to Judd. And Judd gets the scripts, reads them, texts me back, I'm going to work on these 2 episodes by myself at home this weekend. I go, great. I come in to the writer's room. The writers who turn in the scripts, they say, what did Judd think of our scripts? I go, he texted me, he said he's going to work on them by himself over the weekend. They say, oh my God. Oh God. This is the way writers react. This is catastrophe to them. Judd hated our scripts so much that he's taken them from us. He's taken them away. He didn't even invite us to work with him. He hates the scripts. They're crushed. It's the lowest moment of their lives. So I just took the attitude, no, that's just not true. I go, think about it, guys. If you're going to go home on your weekend and work on a script, are you going to do that on a script that sucks? Or are you going to do that on a script that's so good and enjoyable that you're loving it so much you want to take it home and work on it and write it? You guys crushed it. Fucking good job. They looked at me and they were like, we know what you're doing. We appreciate it. And there was some lift of morale there. So I say that's what you do. All right, you now have a yellow belt in show running from Forrester University. Congratulate yourselves. You have a shitload of information. Thank you for being so patient and listening to this. If you still have an appetite, let me share lessons of Apatow, because this is where it gets really interesting. All right, so Apatow. There's something that Judd is doing. You just notice it when you work with this guy. When he gives notes, he's on another level. He really is. He so often orients you in a way that you weren't going, and it's better. And it's happened to me so many times that I've begun to write down some of the patterns of the feedback that I get from Judd. One that we got this year with our writing staff, we got a bunch of experienced good writers. We're writing scripts. we turned in a couple of scripts to Judd, and he did not like them. He said, no, this is wrong. This is not good. And we said, why? It's clever writing. It's so funny. Look at these lines. This dialogue is amazing. And he said, no, it's banter. I don't want banter. I want behavior. Comedy from behavior, behavior over banter. If you're writing things down, write down behavior over banter. What does it mean? It means instead of trying to get your comedy principally from witty exchanges of dialogue, try to get your comedy from the realistic behavior of characters who are flawed. What kind of flaws? If you're egotistical and trying to hide it, you might have certain behaviors. What you hide is a behavior. The show that Judd kept making us watch was Larry Sanders. To him, that's the tone. If you look at the way Hank and Larry interact, it's largely the moves they are making with each other that cause the comedy, and not the funny things they say. Gary Shandling, the Larry Sanders character that Gary Shandling plays, is a talk show host, so he is kind of a witty guy and a maker of jokes. And so there are jokes written within it for sure, but they're all in character. The real comedy actually comes from the jockeying of these characters with each other. And that's really what Judd wants above everything in the writing. The other things he really pushes, real is more important than funny, is a giant Judd Apatow insight that we're learning as we shoot. Over and over again, if he comes by set and likes what you're doing, it's because the actors are pushing for dramatic, realistic performance. If they're doing funny things, but we're breaking reality at all, he hates it. Judd said the other day on set, imagine you are making The Sopranos. Okay, if this is too unreal tone-wise for The Sopranos, I don't want it in the show. That is part of what makes him a tastemaker in comedy, is having that standard of realism. The other giant Judd Apatow technique has to do with the way he casts and shoots the show. So Judd has a high priority on performers that can improvise. He's looking for funny performers, but more than just funny. In the audition scenes themselves, we always write the sides. Those are the audition scenes, and the side ends with actor improvises. And so when we go and watch the auditions, you see the actor do the scene, and then you see the actor's improv skills. Judd consistently wants to hire the actors that have improv skills. Then what he does is two things. One, before the show goes into production, he does cast rehearsals in which the actors are brought in to do rehearsals of scenes. They improvise the bejesus out of it. The writers sit there watching the actors improvise and try to learn what the actor's take on the character is. So the character actually significantly evolves in cast rehearsal before the show is shot. Then, while the show is shot, there is a high priority on improv itself. And this, my friends, is where I think we are potentially evolving the history of TV to some degree in the new Apatow show. Because what we're trying to do is import Judd's improv-heavy movie-making style into a network television schedule. So when Judd goes off and shoots 40-Year-Old Virgin, he's shooting endless amounts of material. He has 4 editors working simultaneously. He might shoot an entire day on a handful of scenes. We can't do that in TV. We have 5-day shoots for 30 pages. We have to shoot much more quickly. Even so, what we're finding is the Apatow system of heavy priority of improv can be accomplished if you have a simplified shooting system. So this is the final gem that I will leave you with. In addition to running a show with an organized plan, a 3-week system perhaps, that gets you to something close to brilliant scripts every time, the other thing you can throw into the mix is have a shooting plan which is simple enough that you can allow for improv. What does that mean? A simple shooting plan would be shoot a wide master shot to show us where we are, and then if there are 2 actors talking, shoot cross coverage. 2 cameras simultaneously, one on one actor, one on the other. That's the basis of simple shooting style that allows for improv. Now, beyond that, you can get some trickier shots, you can move the camera a little bit, but if you make that your core, then you can have, after 3, 4 takes, as scripted, you can get 4, 5 takes improvised. That gives you your extra element of quality. If you hire good improv actors, now you get a whole other level of quality in your comedy, which you can select from in your editing process. That's the key. You guys are now completely capable of going out and running shows on your own. I want to leave you with one anecdote, because to me this kind of sums up the whole philosophy that I'm trying to communicate to you. All right. Very frequently, showrunners feel overwhelmed. They actually, talking to Paul Lieberstein, one of our showrunning friends recently, he said that every year he ran a show, by episode 13, he rooted for the show to be canceled. All right? That is the norm, but it is not the way it can or should be. A television show is a series of tasks, all of which are extremely enjoyable to do in and of themselves. I was working on a TV show 2 seasons ago. The show was in the process of being canceled. We sort of knew it was in demise. I was working one day with one other writer in a room. We still had to make the show, even though we knew it was going down the tubes. Chaos and misery are swirling around us, but we're sitting in a room, writing some scenes together for the show. And as we did this task, I said to Dan Hernandez, Dan, this is so fun. This is pure enjoyment. I'm sitting with another dude who's a funny guy, and we're riffing, writing dialogue, and there's a chance they'll film it. I go, you know, I grew up in the surf culture. We have a term, nectar. Nectar waves are like amazing waves. I said, let's just call this Nectar Wednesday, man. Because we're having so much fun. It's just nectar. And we wrote on a 3x5 card on Wednesday, such and such date, Brent and Dan had a Nectar Wednesday. And we defiantly put it up on the wall to remember forever how enjoyable the job can be. The job should be the greatest job in the world, and if you're organized, it can be. Thank you for listening, and may all your days be Nectar Wednesdays. Thank you very much. If you want to stay and ask questions, we have a guy here. If you want to leave, please do. Our friend Ian will walk around with a microphone if you have any questions at all. Do you want to take 5 minutes and come back? Does that make sense, Jonathan? Or do we just, yeah? No? Keep going. Okay, go. Please leave at any time. We'll not consider it rude.
Can you elaborate a little about the creator versus the showrunner and the division thereof? And
great
one
question.
Of the creators
Yes.
is Zuby.
Yes, great question. That's a great question. Okay, so the term showrunner is actually a term of art. It's not really an official term at all. Your official title would probably be executive producer, but there are many executive producers. The term showrunner, let me put it this way. When I was on The Office Season 9, we had a creator, Greg Daniels. He's absolutely the final word on everything. But he delegated all of the day-to-day tasks to me, principally the writer's room, but anything else that came up if he wasn't around. The line producer on the show always referred to me as the showrunner. But again, it was just his evaluation of what I was doing. I think that a very common thing that happens in TV is that you have creators. Typically a couple of young and experienced creators say, write a script, right? The script is hot, it was based on their blog. Suddenly Fox has picked it up, we want it to be a show. These creators have no experience running a show, so a showrunner is attached to help them do the job, generally a veteran who's done it before. So the creators now in the hierarchy are actually above the showrunner, and that's very typical. The showrunner is not necessarily the final word. I'm in a situation now where I am that showrunner with 2 young writers who are the creators, very talented but don't have the same experience. So what I do is concentrate on the writer's room, make sure the scripts come in on time, and then I expect them to make all the decisions on everything creative. Wardrobe, that's yours. Hair, you guys are the creators. You know what the hair should look like. You know, I could do it, but why should I? We want the creator's vision above all. Apatow is the producer in this situation, complicating the hierarchy because he's above them. He's the sort of, what would you call that, the king of the show in a way, and resolves any disputes that occur. So these hierarchies definitely crop up. I feel like no matter what your configuration is, especially in network TV where you're creating a high volume of scripts, you're going to have somebody who is responsible for the script production. In my mind, that person most deserves to be called the showrunner because script production is the core of the show, and that's really the work of the show. However, if I'm working under Greg Daniels and he walks in and goes, "Hi, I'm Greg Daniels, showrunner," I'm not going to contradict him. It's still a term of art. Great question. What else we got? You can ask questions about writing. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So Greg walks into your writer's room and he's saying, "No, I don't like the thing in the pen." And
Yes.
so who's deferring to who?
Oh, it's going to always be Greg. You know, the creator at that clout level basically has all the final say. And you know, it does create significant problems for the showrunner and the staff if, this is our biggest issue, the biggest problem for your showrunner is you have a showrunner here, creator above showrunner, showrunner greenlights scripts get written, creator decides the story you're writing is wrong. I don't like the story. Everything gets thrown out. That's our biggest problem actually. You start a 3-week process, you start a 4-week process, you get 2 weeks into it, and your creator throws out the story. Or you do a table read, creator throws out the story, you start again. That's our biggest efficiency destroyer, I would say. And it's impossible really to solve. I mean, I don't honestly know how you solve that problem, especially when the creator gets addicted to it, which can happen. You know, we had such a good writing staff in the final years of The Office that you literally could throw out the script at table read, have 2 days until you're going to shoot it, start from nothing, and the writing staff was good enough that we could produce a great script. Once the creator knows that, it's dangerous. Yes?
Can't you involve the creator at the outline level?
Yes, yes, of course. Great point. Okay, so this was part of what I was trying to communicate, and thank you for picking up on it. I think probably your best shot at solving that biggest problem is to try to get early story commitment and investment from the top dude. So how do you do that? Well, in your week 1, tell the story process, try to get a pitch to that top person, right? Now, inevitably, this is what I find with pitches, by the way. Pitches neither succeed nor fail, generally. It's very infrequent that I'm going to come in and pitch a story and you go, boom, it's great, go do it. It's also extremely uncommon that it fails utterly. Generally what happens is the top dog that I'm pitching to will reflect back to me what he or she wants the story to actually be. And this is where your best move is to just stop thinking about what you pitched and listen completely verbatim to what is being said to you. So often, that top dog will tell you precisely what they want the story to be. Write it down in the exact language they use. Generally, I've found Greg Daniels, Judd Apatow, they don't forget their first pitch. It's actually what they really want all along. So that's a great efficiency creator. If you can do it, then again, when you turn in the outline, get the same thing. Force the top dog to really look at that outline and give you concrete notes. In your perfect world, that's the last major rebreak of the story. If you can pull that off, then everything goes smoothly.
Except for when the studio and the network comes back with notes and wants the story.
Right, sure. Well, that's a whole other element of it. In fact, when I told some friends today that I was going to talk about show running, they thought that would be the entire lecture. That's how big that element can be. And that one really depends case by case. So Netflix, they have a different model, it seems like. It's just uncanny, really. It seems like what has happened with Netflix is they're having an experience like with House of Cards where they get involved with big players who have big egos and don't take notes. And it worked for them with House of Cards. So that's the method they're using. I can tell you with this Apatow show, there's no notes, zero. You know, we shared our overview of the season with Netflix, but we did not expect nor receive any critical feedback from them at all. How does that work for the creators? Is that a good thing? Emphatically, yes. It really is. I mean, right? I'm not the first person to have supposed this. Many writers before me have said that the network development process is essentially just negative. The reason being, I think, that if you think about the creative process when you're trying to create a pilot, for example, you know, in the early stages, what you most need as a creator is encouragement, positive feedback, because you're trying to work out a lot of stuff. You're trying to invent characters. You're trying to invent a world. Unfortunately, the network process is designed to give you critical feedback too soon. So you have a bunch of executives who are paid, they're smart, they're trying to do their job, they're trying to make sure that this script doesn't turn out terribly. They come aggressively in with notes before you figured out what you're doing. And even a confident writer will get swayed by that, because it's a lot like if you were performing before you were ready and the audience in your early stages was giving you guidance. You so much want positive feedback from the audience that you'll go in their direction, even though it corrupts your original inspiration and vision. So it's a long way of saying I think that the Netflix process creatively is a much better one. That's certainly what we're dealing with now. In the front.
Oh, yeah, good, because I was going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on Netflix and working
Yes.
over there specifically, like, I mean, if there's anything else you want to add, please
Sure.
add, but specifically I was thinking, like, what is the schedule like
Yes.
at Netflix as opposed to, like, a network or cable show?
Sure.
And also, why do they order 10 and then order 2 seasons?
Yes.
And then is there a break in between, or just do 20?
Yeah, good question. Okay, so the deal we have with Netflix is 2 seasons. The first is 10 episodes, the second is 13. I think largely that was a function of Judd Apatow's clout and that he had multiple bidders. So he had Hulu and Netflix bidding on his show simultaneously, and so he just kept upping his demands. You know, he said, I want 10 episodes guaranteed. Oh, wait, Hulu's offering that? Well, then I want 2 seasons guaranteed, and he just kept getting yes. So that's how we got 2 seasons. That, by the way, for those of us who've worked in TV, that alone is just a miracle for you as a creator. Because most of the time, imagine this, you do a network show, okay, you got your pilot greenlit, you don't know if you're doing 13 or 22 until you get greenlit for the 22. Which means, are you arcing out a story of 13 episodes in which the 2 lovers fall for each other by the end, episode 13, your end? Or is your end 22? You're going to arc it out that way. You don't even know. It's madness, honestly. It makes it impossible for you to really properly arc out a season. The fact that we know we have 10, and we're done, and then we do 13, means we can really, we can take our time in the storytelling. We don't have to get crazy ratings by episode 4 or we're canceled. It allows us to do something which is really exciting, which is slow everything down. That's been a wonderful thing for us creatively. When you're on a network show, you literally are looking at the ratings every week. How did the pilot do? Oh shit, fuck, episode 2 we're down. Oh, they always go down. Guys, they always go down. We're supposed to be prepared for that, right? You're just in this neurotic state of watching the ratings. Episode 3, we're trying to get it up. You know what? I think we gotta speed things up. I think these 2 they should get married maybe in episode 4. Push everything. You know, the guy who's possibly gay, he's got to come out. This guy's got to come out. You know, you can't stage anything because you're trying to get it all. We got to get the ratings right. So when that pressure is taken away, it's a huge boon for you creatively. You know, what we're finding is I actually couldn't believe how slowly we were telling the story that we're telling on Love. Essentially a modern romantic comedy, 2 characters. In the first episode, in the pilot of Love, the 2 characters, the guy and the girl, we follow them separately as each of them has a catastrophic breakup. In the end of the episode, in the last scene, they meet. It's just so bold relative to what we would do in network, where we'd be like, you can't do that. It's impossible. We've got to kind of meet in the second scene, right? And we've kept that pace going. It's like, you know, episode 2 is almost real time, them walking around talking is most of episode 2. And then episode 3, they don't see each other at all. They're at work. It's just, when we first started doing this, I was like, Judd, this is crazy. We can't, the people will never follow. But over time, we've come to realize, oh no, this is the way to do it. This feels correct, interesting, and exciting in a way that we wouldn't be able to do. The other big thing about Netflix and the video on demand places is that they are reflecting a desire for the audience, from the audience now, for serialized storytelling, completely serialized. So, there are no standalone episodes of Love. There are no standalone episodes of most Netflix shows. If Netflix has their way, they really want serialized storytelling. The way the viewers watch a Netflix show typically is they watch 4 in a row, and then they take a pause and watch some more. So, what we've discovered in terms of the storytelling is it's a lot more like making a long movie. So we're making like a 5-hour movie is what we're doing in our first season. And it does affect the way you structure it out. Because you say, well, what's the first act of this movie? Maybe episodes 1 through 3 are kind of our first act. And then we have the middle, and then the finale is the last couple. So, it definitely changes the way you look at structuring it big time. Questions?
And then as far as the schedule also of the writing room, is that the same?
The schedule seems to be about the same. Yeah, we happened to get a little extra pre-production, which was nice. We also did a thing which is unusual, which is we got together, the writers got together before the season, and we would kind of hang out, 4 hours a day, a couple times a week. And through that process, which was really just informal, we got massively ahead. I don't mean to brag, but I don't think this has been done in the history of television. We did a table read of 8 episodes over 2 days, 8 weeks before production. I just don't, it's crazy that we did it. I mean, my problem now is I show up at work, I'm like, guys, we have nothing to do again. Honestly, I just got too far ahead. But it's interesting to discover that it can be done when the whole culture of TV is this feeling of being behind all the time. It turns out that's not necessarily the case. But the schedule for Netflix, the production schedule seems about the same in terms of, yes, the writing and production. Our budget seems about the same. We have a 6-day shooting pattern. We were normally, my experience is a 5-day shooting pattern for network TV, but the episodes are a little longer in Netflix, at least for us, so we've added a 6th day. But other than that, it really feels like network TV in all other aspects, except the shorter order. In the back.
Netflix shows kind of range. You kind of look at like House of Cards, how episodes kind of they fluctuate in length. Do you find that kind of freedom where you can shoot, say, a 30-minute or 35-minute, or make the pilot longer versus your finale?
It's a great question, a great point, and the answer is yes. You don't have to stick to 22 minutes. In network, we were always frustrated at the office in the later seasons because we found that we could massively overshoot the show, and so often, as some of the office writers will remember, we had like 45 minutes of good material sometimes, and so sometimes we got the NBC to allow us to split an episode into 2. Sometimes they would let us supersize it a little bit, but for the most part, we were constrained by the time limit. Netflix is much more flexible. They do not care. They actually have a range. What is our range, Mason?
27 to 34, I think.
Yeah, 27 to 34. That's a pretty big range. And it's great because, some of your episodes you're going to want to put in more and some less. I think it's another real creative advantage that we have.
There are some shows that have episodes teleplay by, story by, and then written by. And some shows it's all one person. Is that because the showrunner decided to kind of departmentalize what he or she wanted to do?
I guess it is. I haven't seen that very much. Generally, the way the industry standard, as I've experienced it, is that a writer is assigned to be the author of the script. And once that author is assigned, that's the author from beginning to end. Now, the author, by the time the episode is shot, sometimes 75% of that author's original material is what's shot, but sometimes 0%. And it's surprisingly common that it's just, you know what, we tried, but we just ended up scrubbing everything and starting over. Still, that writer will retain full authorship and, in a weird way, will retain a sense of having created it, I've noticed, right? Because the truth is, at the table read, whether you wrote it or not, They say, okay, we're now going to read episode 106 by Shirley Johnson, and Shirley hears her name and sweats and feels like this is a reflection on me. And so we definitely try to respect the author's name and the fact that it reflects on that person. That person, I've seen very little of that splitting up of story by and written by. So Love we have one or two where we have multiple authorship. I guess it really depends on the top person. Judd likes writing with other writers, so he's got a couple of co-writing credits. But I have not seen much of that one where it says story by and then written by another person.
It's the shows are Mike and Molly. I can't think of the showrunner's name.
Sure.
Chuck Lorre.
Chuck Lorre.
Sure.
He's always splitting up, and I just wondered if it's because he felt like he rewrote
Sure.
everything, or did the story with somebody else and passed it off to
Yeah.
other writers.
Presumably that's what happened, is that he feels, hey, this was my story, I want the credit, and there's a money issue there too. Like if you have the story by credit, you get some of the profits of that. Although probably Chuck Lorre isn't thinking of it monetarily, right? He's just probably thinking, I thought of that story. I always find that interesting. When I was on the Ben Stiller show, we had this incredibly egalitarian feeling. We were practically socialist. And the idea was that if anybody walked into your room while you were writing and helped you at all, you would give them co-authorship on the story. And I kind of like shows that are like that, are a little more generous in terms of sharing credit. It seems to work better. And it goes to my feeling of the team process. Shows which have a team spirit work better. Shows where the basic understanding is that if the show does well, everybody does well, work much better. That kind of ticky-tack divvying up of credit makes me suspicious, and I wouldn't do it. In the back.
Yeah, you mentioned the importance of behavior over banter when
Yes.
writing comedy, and you said Larry Sanders was a good example. Is there any other shows that you think are good examples of that?
Judd thinks that Girls is a good example of that. So, interestingly, he's very proud of the tone of Girls in terms of behavior over banter. I think you see, the dramas are actually a good place to look oddly for the tone that Judd likes. As comedy writers, we are easily tempted into the surreal, the unreal, the heightened, even sometimes the silly, the crazy. Those kind of energies are attractive sometimes when you're writing comedy. And I think, so many of the good creators that we all respect have fought aggressively against that. The Office was a very good example of that. It started with Ricky Gervais's British Office. The tone of that was essentially really realistic. In fact, the fact that it was a mockumentary helped that. It set a documentary tone, which kind of increases the tone of realism. But you do have to stick to your guns on that, because it can be very easy to start writing lines which are funny but a person wouldn't really say, or do behavior which is funny but wouldn't really happen. What you find is it kind of ruins the realism of your tone. I think behavior over banter is part of that. That people don't wittily banter as much as comedy shows do. And in fact, I don't know, it's very possible that the writing process itself will tend toward the creation of bantery writing. Essentially, it's writers sitting in a room. What do we have? We have our banter, we have our writing. That's what we're kind of giving each other positive feedback for. So it's easy for scripts to get very bantery. I find also that it's a result of the balkanization of the actors. Once you bring in actors, things become much more behavioral, because that's what they respond to. I think Judd, part of Judd's process was he did not, he started as a performer. He didn't really care early on for the sitting and tweaking and noodling of scripts. He liked a fast pass of the script, cast it, get the actors in, start hearing it aloud, and kind of adapt to the way the actors actually talk. So because of his natural proclivity towards that process and his hatred of sitting and writing, he developed this system which turns out to be a better way towards quality, I think. the back.
Is there a way to show or make yourself seem more accessible to people as possible right off the bat when you start the show?
Sure.
Without seeming catering, so as to put your staff at ease.
Yes.
And as well as invite creativity.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you're really talking about a human question, a management question, but also a human interaction question. You know, I have a whole list of things that I have collected in terms of how do you best interact with people. For example, if you're on a meeting and you're pitching, situations of high tension, which also work, I think, in the writer's room. Long ago, I wrote down on a piece of paper, try smiling. It's a remarkable technique. I use it all the time. You know, you walk into a room so often, in any business situation, certainly on a TV show, you walk into a room and there is tension. You can feel it, and you can easily respond to it. But what I found is you also have the opportunity to set the tone. You can walk in smiling, complimenting people. You know, very often I compliment people on, as I say, the work they did yesterday, just as a way of setting the tone. I think, you know, asking people questions is a great way of creating esprit de corps and connection in a room. Even though you're the leader, you don't have to be the one who's the talker all the time. And as I was pointing out, as soon as you ask a question of somebody, you have the opportunity to give them positive feedback on what they said. And I find the positive feedback loop can start very quickly in dialogue. And can fuel your whole day. You said something else, which is, if I got you right, is not talking down to people. I think is really key, and especially as you get to be more of a veteran in the business, it's easy to think of yourself as older, more experienced, and kind of ossified in your thinking and in your knowledge. Whereas in fact, truth is, remarkably, for almost everybody who works in the business, writers, directors, everybody, you can learn titanically significant things almost every day in the job. I think that's a good attitude to bring to it. I think actually, in the writer's room itself, I found that there are a number of metaphors for interaction that come up for me. So early on in pre-production, when you're talking about the show and talking about what are we doing, what is a great show, the metaphor is university, academia. We're all sitting here talking about writing, we're talking about drama, we're talking about TV, we're talking about art. It has this wonderful academic feel. Once you get into production and things are more slam bang, I remember at the office, I used to say, come on guys, comedy law firm, let's go. Billable hours, we're doing it. Comedy law firm is an enjoyable metaphor. We're no longer academic. We're working for a living. We're professionals who get it done efficiently. You know, in directing, when you get all the way to, oh shit, man, we're directing this thing, maybe you're the writer on set, maybe you're actually the director, I find that you can really get into almost a military metaphor, where you're the general, you're the captain, your guys are campaigning, you're plotting a battle, and at that point, you feel a high degree of stakes and nervousness, but you're going to lead this team into battle and you're highly organized. And these metaphors come up for me unbidden. I find them all enjoyable. It's fun to be in academia, it's fun to be in comedy law firm, and it's fun actually to imagine yourself with the high stakes of a battle. And to apply the sort of leadership attitude for each of those. The ones that, the metaphor which most frequently crops up in TV rooms that I think is inefficient is we're hanging out bullshitting, which is super enjoyable but gets you nowhere, and it's almost the default setting for writers in a room. All right, you guys have tested your patience. Let's have one more question, then we'll wrap it up. In the back. That's you.
So you wrote a roadmap to get you to the place you wanted to go. Let's say you took yourself to San Pedro and you found out you should be in San Jose.
Okay.
How do you reroute yourself? What strategies do you have to say, okay, I need to get the other way?
Great question, right? So you're really at the core of the whole creative process. And, I would say that for me, again, trial and error is the key. It took me so long to realize that just because I'm a professional writer doesn't mean that I really know what the answer is in any given situation. You know, you sort of feel like, well, shit, if I'm a writer, I should be able to have an answer to this question. If I'm a comedy writer, I should have some kind of joke that I can pitch at this point. But the truth is, at most times, on most days, most of us don't really have a quick answer to anything. So what you really want to do is trial and error. You know, just try something. Let's go down a path. Let's pitch something out there. If you also have a good team environment, what that means is you can pitch something that's sort of half-formed, perhaps, but has a good core to it. And then I can say, you know, there's something good there, but what if we went this way? And somebody else says, yeah, I like that, but what if we went this way? If we are a collaborative team supporting each other through the trial and error process, honestly, you can just say, well, let's take this story which we don't think works and just keep blathering about it for 45 minutes. Go in different directions on it. Almost always, you're going to have some kind of breakthrough if you simply apply focused time to that problem. Trial and error is your friend. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. When you are running your shows, all of you young people, and you're running Paramount and all these things, please think of me and hire me. I'll be an old man who just wants a free lunch, and just remember this free lecture and get me a sandwich. Thanks, guys.